Greetings and welcome to the Spawn Commune. My name is Anijat and I will be your guide and your chaperone through the heart of darkness that is music production. For this first episode, we bring you a guide on sidechaining. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with sidechaining, but we'll be looking at some of my favorite techniques and I'll show you three different levels of how you can take sidechaining to the next level. So, without much further ado, let's jump into it. All right, gents, here we are inside Ableton, and welcome once again. As I was mentioning in the intro, we shall be talking about sidechaining today, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the common ways of sidechaining that includes the compressor and stuff like that. But we will be going a step further and looking at a couple more techniques, plus a bonus tip on how you can, maybe make a customized sidechain for yourself. So, without much more delays, let's jump into this. So obviously we're looking at level 1 here. That will be the first level of sidechaining that we're going to be doing. That includes the standard compressor and ghost sidechain channel technique that you can see over here. I've made a ghost channel for my secondary sidechain. So what I'm going to do now is use the standard technique, and as you can see here, I already have a bunch of sounds laid out here in front of me. Let me just play it for you and I'll show you why it will need sidechain for sure. Right, so this is a sort of melodic track that I just wrote very quickly within 5 minutes, and I mean, at least it's the beginnings of one. It obviously needs a lot more work, and of course one of those things includes sidechaining. So what we'll do is let's start with a standard sidechain that you may be familiar with, which is of course using the compressor in Ableton. So what we'll do, of course, is we'll take the kick and bass as our first candidates and we'll use them as examples. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to put a compressor on the bass, like a standard technique that we have, where we take a input signal from a source such as a kick in this case, and we make sure that the volume of the kick and bass are sort of alternating. That means that whenever the kick hits, the volume of the bass would duck down, making space for the kick. And that, of course, is the fundamentals of sidechaining. It is basically creating space for other sounds when one of the sounds is playing. So it works very well in sounds that overlap. So this is one of the most basic examples of where sidechain is useful and used most often. So I've just opened up Ableton's compressor. And as you guys know, the typical technique is you open up the sidechain section over here. As you can see, it says sidechain over here. And to open this section, you just need to click on this arrow. And you have this whole section here dedicated for external sidechaining. Now, compressors also have an internal sidechain that basically, you can define as the ears of the compressor. And compressors use this internal sidechain to decide what parts of the frequency they would like to compress specifically. We'll dive more deep into that maybe in another video when I talk about compression. But for now, let's just look at the external sidechain, which we'll be using in this particular case for the kick and bass. So I'll turn on the external sidechain over here, and I will choose the source as our SC source. Now keep in mind that this SC source is nothing but a duplicate of the kick drum. I have a kick drum here, which is basically I just bounced into audio, and I've just duplicated the channel. And most importantly, you have to make sure that the audio too, that means that the routing of this particular sidechain signal, that is basically a duplicate of the kick drum, is going to sends only. That means that only devices that have the capability of listening to this send signal or even the return channels, only these sort of areas in Ableton will be able to hear it. You as a listener will not be able to hear it. And that's kind of the point, because we only want the compressor to hear this signal. We don't want to hear this extra kick drum because we already have a kick drum doing its job. So that's why these ghost channels become necessary when you are doing standard side chaining like in a compressor. So yeah, coming back to this, now what I'll do is I'll just play maybe solo the kick and bass so that you guys can hear it, and I'll just play it. Yeah, so as you can see, the kick and bass very much overlapping with each other, maybe even causing a bit of muddiness in the low end, and basically making the low end sound very claustrophobic and very congested. There's no space for either the kick or the bass to breathe. So we're gonna fix that with the sidechain, that being the purpose of a sidechain. So now that we have taken the signal from the SC source, which is, as I said, the duplicate of a kick drum, and it plays the same pattern as a kick drum does, same speed. I will take this source, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this threshold line over here. This is basically the same as this threshold here. It's just a different view inside the compressor. So I'm going to take the threshold and pull it down until I start hearing some pumping. And then I'm going to adjust the rest of the parameters to make sure that my sidechain is as tight and clean as possible. So I'm going to turn it down. So as you can see over here, the kick signal is coming in and the sidechain is also happening because I've gone below the threshold. So that means that the kick is now being now sending that sidechain signal to the bass. Another tip I can give you here is from the RMS, I would suggest you switch it to peak mode, because this allows the compressor to read the sidechain signal along with the peaks of the sound that it's receiving, rather than the RMS being the average volume that it hears. But in this case, because we want accuracy of our sidechain, it is more preferable that you stick to peak mode so that the sidechain compressor is listening to the peaks of the kick rather than the average volume of the kick. Right. So now that we have a little bit of that pumping effect that we need going on, let me just quickly cover the other controls that you need to fine tune your sidechain inside a compressor. Now, that being the sidechain filter. This filter basically decides what part of the frequency that the compressor is listening to. As I said, it's the ears of the compressor. But in this case, because we are receiving external sources for our sidechain, it is going to, yes, listen to the sidechain source externally and decide what frequencies are being ducked compared to the sidechain signal that's coming into the compressor. So that means, in this case, if you look at this filter over here, it is a high pass filter. And the high pass is happening at about 80 hertz. Now that means everything above the frequency of 80 hertz will be sidechained, and everything below the frequency of 80 hertz will be totally ignored by the compressor. The compressor will ignore those signals. Now, obviously, you have different types of filters. You can obviously fine tune it. You can make it a low pass filter, and then the opposite is true, where everything below 80 hertz is now being sidechained and everything above 80 hertz is ignored. So let's actually keep it to our original high pass filter, and we will adjust this frequency and adjust what the compressor is listening to while it's doing its sidechaining. And also, along with the filter frequency, there is also a resonance control. This again, you can control if you'd like to make sure that the rollover of the frequency is smoother rather than it having a resonance and enhancing certain parts of the frequency range. So this is what the sidechain filter is for. Another section you have over here is, of course, your ratio attack release, which is, of course, as you know, the most common parameters in a compressor used for normal compression. But in this case, they are basically deciding how fast the sidechain starts to work and stops working. And of course, the strength of the sidechain along with the threshold is decided by the ratio. So we're going to use these controls to now quickly fine tune our sidechain before we move on to the next part. Yeah. So now we have our pumping effect going on. Now I would like my sidechain to work a bit quicker. So I'll just reduce the attack time maybe a little bit and the release as well. Now, in this case, you can actually switch on auto release, which does a good job at adjusting the release according to where the transient of the kick ends or where the body of the kick ends, and then it releases the compressor. But always best to fine tune it yourself. There we go. Now you can increase the ratio if you want. I can maybe go to a 7:1 to give a slight more pump. Yeah, now you can hear that subtle improvement and subtle more reduction of gain that happens with the sidechain. And obviously the last parameter that we're going to adjust is I'm going to use the frequency knob inside the sidechain filter to maybe fine tune the frequency that is being let through, as well as the frequency that is being sidechained by the sidechain. Yes. So as you can see, as soon as I reduced the frequency to about 40 hertz, it's starting to sidechain even the frequencies that go below 40 hertz. That's basically some of the body of the kick and some of the subbiness in the kick. That also is come into play now in the sidechain. But for me, that may not be that much of a priority, because my main objective is to use the peaks of the kick, which is the transient of the kick, and that make that interact with the bass so that I get a more pronounced pumping effect. Yeah, this is quite drastic. So what I'll do is I'll just go back to 80 again and maybe crank it up. Yes, there we go. That's much better, I feel. So yeah, maybe around 170 is good. Adjust the threshold. So now, as you can see, that the threshold is now much lower, and I have adjusted the frequency to about 170 hertz. So that means that the peak and the transient of the kick, which has those frequencies, is pronounced a bit more, and that's what the compressor is responding to. So that's important, something important to note while you are doing your sidechaining. So yeah, this actually concludes some of the basic controls that you have inside a compressor, and that's level 1 of sidechaining. Let's move on. Right, here we are in the level 2 of sidechaining. Now, if you remember in sidechaining part 1, we did the standard compression. Now I'm going to take it a step further and introduce you to maybe another device that you may or may not be familiar with, and it's called Kickstart. Now this is developed in tandem with Nicky Romero, as you guys know, the famous EDM producer, and the guys at Cable Guys. This was developed in collaboration with both of them. And this device was specifically made for sidechaining. It was made for ducking. It was made to create space for the kick when a bass plays. As you guys can see here with this yellow color line, which is basically nothing but shaping the volume of this particular sound. Now in this case, I obviously have it again on the bass itself. So this is nothing but dictating the volume of the bass. So you have a whole bunch of shapes here that you can choose from, all like the typical sidechain parameters and shapes that you have. So let's maybe try with this one. This is one of the ones I usually use. And of course, to create space for the kick, I just select this portion, as you can see, the yellow portion of this section over here, and I just drag it to the right, because this area is where the kick will sit. And as you can see, the timing of this particular device is a quarter note. So that means we know that a kick plays every quarter note. So that means the kick will sit in this area over here. And of course, we have our kickstart, making sure that the volume is much lower here, and it gradually comes up in the bass, and the bass is more present in the second half of that particular beat, right? So let's hear how this sounds. I've removed the normal compressor for the normal sidechain. Let's see how it sounds with the kickstart. I'll turn it off first. Yeah, there we go. Now I'll turn on kickstart. Yeah, so you can hear a sidechain happening. Now I'll move it maybe a bit more to the right so you can hear it a bit more. Yeah, I just love the way Kickstart is able to kind of create this separation between the kick and bass by moving the most of the amplitude of the bass towards the second half of the beat. And it's a very easy way to create that sort of separation between the kick and bass, and I use this device quite often. Another very good perk of using Kickstart 2 is that it has a sort of stealth sidechain, a frequency specific sidechain that can be sort of utilized in this section over here. Now, for those of you familiar with Shaperbox, even Shaperbox has a similar volume shaping parameter where you can shape the volume for certain frequencies and let the other frequencies remain as they are. This works on the same principle, except that they have simplified it and they have just given it on and off button and a slider to adjust where the frequencies would be present inside the sidechain. So for this example, what I will do is I'm going to let this kickstart remain on the bass. I'm going to duplicate it and I'm going to place it on another element, which is our atmosphere. And this is how the atmosphere sounds. I'll just solo it so you guys can hear it. And turn off the kickstart. Yeah, so it's a simple atmosphere I made using Ableton's Drift, and I bounce the audio and just put some basic auto filter, LFO modulation, reverb on it. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Now what you can do on this atmosphere is obviously add a sidechain, because this is something also that might interfere with some other elements, especially the kick. And also it'll be nice to give an atmosphere a bit of that pumping rhythm that we like so much. So I'm going to solo the first three elements like we did before. So now you can hear that the kick and bass have a good sidechain interaction going on. I'm going to introduce the same pumping effect on the atmosphere as well, so that it has the same effect. Now I'm going to turn on the kickstart. And we may not want the sidechain to be so intense. So obviously I'm going to adjust both the drivette or the intensity of the kickstart. That's over here. And of course, I'm going to also adjust the placement of where the volume shaping takes place. And then, of course, we will adjust the frequencies of the sidechain. Yeah. Yeah. So that pumping effect, although it sounds great, I think it's a bit intense and I want the atmosphere to breathe a little bit more. I don't want it to duck so hard. So what I'm going to do is, instead of moving this, I'm just going to reduce the mix knob to, let's say, about 75%, and let's hear how it sounds. Yes, much gentler, maybe 70%, 65. Yeah. Now I'm happy with the volume shaping that's happening, and it's at about 65%, which is, I think, good enough for this particular sound. We don't want it pumping too hard. Another thing, as I was telling earlier, the stealth sidechain that you can do with the Kickstart 2 is you can do it with the frequency band adjuster over here, where you turn on the band, and now you have control over the ducking that's happening. Now this actually follows the same principle as the compressor's sidechain filter does, because at the end, that's the ears of the compressor, as I said. And in this case, the Kickstart's ears is this particular filter over here. This decides what the ducking system listens to and ignores. So in this case, what you can see is that, for example, right now, the ducking that's happening is everything below 320 hertz, that yellow part that you see, and everything above 320 hertz is ignored. Now, this can actually work for a pad, because even if the pad has some low frequencies, which we'll be removing later on with an equalizer, we want most of the ducking to happen in the mid frequency range, and the airy part of the pad, we wanted to let it breathe. So you can adjust that very well using this parameter over here. So let's do that. Let's hear it, and I'm going to start adjusting it. You'll be able to hear the effect. Crank it up a bit. So as you can see, as soon as I went above about 2.5 kilohertz, it started to pump more, because a lot of the frequencies inside the atmosphere are present in that frequency zone. So what we'll do is, we'll not go to that extent. We'll keep it a little bit below that, so that we don't want the pumping to be too hard. And as I said, we want the pumping effect, the volume shaping, to be a little bit more subtle and to be a bit more stealthy, basically. So I'll just turn it down to about 70%, and Yeah, there you go. Now the sidechain is happening. A lot of the frequencies that are below 1.2 kilohertz are being ducked and ducked quite hard. In fact, so much so that you can barely even hear it. So that's something that really enhances the other frequencies which are above 1.2 kilohertz, and also makes the low end much cleaner. Now, obviously, you can add and you will add an equalizer after this as a precautionary measure to clear out all the unnecessary low end that the atmosphere may have. But this actually takes care of a lot of that effort for you as well. So, yeah, this is level 2 of sidechaining, and hope you liked it. Let's move on to level 3. Level 3, here we go. Welcome back. Now we are going to be looking at another sort of stage, another style of sidechaining, which is actually gaining a lot of popularity nowadays. I've been seeing people use this style of sidechaining because digital devices and technology have enabled us to do so. And this style of sidechaining, which I'm talking about, is called spectral sidechaining or frequency specific sidechaining. Now, this is slightly different from the frequency specific sidechaining that we might see in Ableton's compressor or even in Kickstart, where you narrow down on a band of frequencies or choose either you select a certain portion of frequencies and duck them and sidechain them. But this actually gets a little bit more specific than that. So for this particular example, I'm going to show you a couple of techniques which you can use as well. And I will introduce you to a few new plugins as well. So let's start off with one of them. And you may have heard of it. It's quite popular. It's called Soothe 2. Here it is. Yeah. So Suit 2 is, of course, one of those plugins that is just like so popular right now because so many people are using it. It's so easy to use. It does something that there are a lot of plugins out there who have tried to copy Soothe because it was sort of the first of its kind, and it did something very unique. That was basically resonance suppression and frequency specific ducking that it specializes in. Aside from that, you obviously have other tools which are very similar to what Suit 2 does. You have another one called Track Spacer, which is again very useful and does some similar kind of processing, which is frequency specific processing ducking with your sidechaining and, of course, other kinds of processing as well. And the last option that we have for this is Fab Filters Pro Q4. Now, if you are familiar with FabFilter products and if you've used the ProQ4 before, you probably know what I'm talking about. But if you don't, I think today might be a good opportunity for you to learn about this, and I'll be happy to show it to you. So let's do that. Let me actually just delete Suit 2 and Track Spacer. I will obviously cover them later on, maybe in another example. But the example I want to show you currently is how this frequency specific spectral EQing ducking works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take two elements which I feel might be around the same frequency spectrum and might be sort of fighting with each other in that frequency spectrum. Now, this usually happens in the low end and especially in the mid range as well, especially in music that has a lot of harmonic elements in it, a lot of heavy bass in it. So this is something you have to keep in mind while you are mixing these elements together. So for example, what we can do is take two elements, which is the atmosphere and the lead. Now, these two elements occupy very similar frequency ranges. They occupy the mids. So let's hear them together so you know what I mean. They have a slight sort of clash happening where they are maybe kind of overlapping with each other in terms of frequency. So the lead occupies this range. So majority of the leads frequencies are somewhere between 178 to about 950 approximately. Now, if we go to, let's say, our atmosphere, It is also occupying a similar frequency zone, which is between 118 to about 950. So, because these two sounds largely occupy very similar frequency zones, it does make sense to sort of carve out a bit of space in a sound that's continuous for a sound that's a little bit more occasional. In this case, that would apply, of course, to the atmosphere and the lead. The atmosphere being the continuous sound, which is basically repeating itself continuously, and the lead being the sound that happens occasionally. That means, as you can see, it doesn't repeat, and you can see the notes. It happens every few bars. So we're going to take these two elements and make them sit well with each other using fab filters features. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to duplicate this fab filter and I'm going to put one on the Atmos and one on the lead. Now, a very cool sort of feature and very useful feature inside the new Fab Filter Pro Q4 is that you can actually see all instances of Fab Filter in your whole project. If you just press that, if you didn't see that, you just go back and you just press the name of the channel that it's on, and it will open up all the instances of Fab Filter throughout your whole project. Now, at the moment, I only have this particular Fab Filter Pro Q4 on two of my elements. That's my atmosphere and lead. And aside from that, the advantage of this is you are able to see parallelly which sort of elements, these sort of frequencies are being generated here, and what is clashing and what isn't clashing. So if I now press play, you can see those sort of red marks that appeared over there, those red indicators. That's telling to me that there's some frequencies in this area that are not really sitting well with the leads frequencies, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play it again, and I'm going to narrow down on that area where Fab Filter tells me that there is some kind of issue. So, which is around this zone. Yeah. It's around the range of about 200 hertz and above that. So what I'm going to do now is I'll just close this and I'll go back to Atmos, and the Fab Filter instance that I have here now has the same dip that I made before, right? So now this is very useful for us because now we know that it's approximately in this area where there's a lot of clashes happening, a lot of frequencies maybe not sitting well with each other, or they're masking each other, or they're just overlapping and, eating away a lot of the harmonics maybe. So what we can do is I'm going to right click over here and I'm going to select make spectral. And now the spectral mode of this equalizer is active. Now you might be familiar with, if I just clear spectral, you might be familiar with the dynamic EQ that comes from Pro Q3, where the EQ moves in response to the amplitude or the volume or the sound that it's able to hear. Now this gets a little bit more specific. It actually works kind of similar to Sooth, where it targets specific frequencies. So in practice, it would look something like this. What I would do is I would take the sidechain input of the Pro Q4, turn on the input and take the input from the lead. So that means whenever the lead plays, I would like to create some space inside the Atmos for the lead so that the lead sits inside the Atmos a little bit more comfortably. So now that the sidechain is taken from the lead, we obviously have to activate the sidechain inside the plugin, which happens over here. So you click on these two small arrows and it opens up this spectral section where you have a few parameters. Obviously you have a threshold, you have attack release, and a very important button for us, this is the external sidechain button over here. So as soon as I press this button, you see it turns blue. That means that it is now receiving external sidechain input. That means that this Pro Q4, which is on the Atmos, is listening to the lead. So now if I play the Atmos and lead together, and let me turn the band to, and I can turn on spectral mode as well. You can actually increase the density of the spectral filters. That means that it's going to get very, very specific with the ducking that it's doing for those frequencies. You can adjust the intensity of the ducking, use the threshold to do the same. Yeah, it's already made a huge difference. So now if I play it with and without, so you can you'll be able to tell the difference. I'm gonna turn off the Pro Q4. Let's hear it without the spectral ducking. This is with. You see how the lead just shines a bit more. It's able to pop out a bit more versus in the first iteration without the Pro Q4, it was struggling a bit to breathe and to pop out and to shine. So these kind of small techniques really help in making your interaction between different elements make more sense. And also just goes to show that sidechain doesn't need to always apply to kick and bass. You can sidechain anything to anything and make your tracks more clear, make them more breathable, and give the elements the space that they deserve. And of course, not make your track sound like it's stuck in a box. So yeah, that's basically some of the things you can do with the spectral sidechaining. You can obviously apply a similar technique to, let's say, your bass. Now, instead of the kickstart and the frequency specific band, the normal ducking that we're doing, I can actually do frequency specific ducking here as well. But instead of kickstart, I'll use a different plugin called Track Spacer. Track Spacer, very popular plugin by Waves Factory. I would highly recommend this one as well. Similar principle in this, you enable the sidechain input from the kick now that we have Track Spacer on the bass. And you have a low cut, high cut to decide where the ducking will happen, but I'll come to that in a second. Now in Track Spacer, if I press this blue button, it goes inside this mode over here. This is the advanced panel. And now I can enable sidechain over here. And I obviously have an attack and release also. So I want obviously the sidechain to work quickly. So I will make the attack and release quite short so that it works quickly. I don't want it too short, but yeah, I'll make it quick enough. And obviously you also have a mid-side mode, so you can do mid-side specific sidechaining. So if you'd like, you can enable this, where you can have sidechain specific to the mids only or sides, which is amazing. Like it takes your ducking and mix down to the whole new level. We will cover this in a different video. So now coming back to our Track Spacer. Now if I turn on Track Spacer, yeah, so now kick bass is on, and now the ducking is not really that evident, but what we can do is I'm going to just crank this up a lot. This is basically the ratio of, or the amount of ducking that's happening. Yeah, there we go. So you can see over here, the spectrum is showing specific frequencies. Wherever the kick is present, it's ducking that, and wherever the kick isn't present, it's ignoring it. So, and you're still getting the pumping effect that we all like. Right. So that was level 3 of spectral sidechaining. Right. Now that we've covered 3 levels of sidechaining, it's time for the bonus step. Now, this bonus step basically involves you creating your own specific sidechain. Now, obviously, a lot of you may not be able to get your hands on things like a kickstart. So let me show you how you can kind of make your own kickstart inside Ableton. Very simple. We're just going to need 2 devices. One of them being Ableton's utility. And I'm going to put this on the shaker because we're going to sidechain this next. And I will put this device called the shaper. Now, already you can see kind of a resemblance that it has to kickstart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on map. I'm going to change the shape of the shaper because I want it to be more like a sidechain. So maybe something like this, and then, curve it a bit. And then I'll change it to remote. And I wanted to map it to the gain of this particular channel. So once I do that, you can see, yes, the gain knob is now following the shape of the particular shaper that we have over here, this volume shaping. Now, obviously, I don't want it to go all the way from minus infinity to all the way up. That'll be too crazy and it'll probably blow your head off. So what I'll do is I'll put it to 50%. So that now the gain is now moving from 0 to 50% every time the shaper hits. And now this is basically a volume shaper, and you can adjust the shape, adjust the length of the sidechain according to your comfort, and make sure you keep the rate at 1/4. That's basically quarter note, because that's when the kick plays, right? Now what we can do is we can quickly just play the shaper and utility. I'm just going to group it and I'll turn it off. So now we have a improvised kickstart that we've created, and I've put it on the shaker because without the sidechain, the shaker is just playing continuously 16 notes, as you can see over here. It's just playing 16 notes. Yeah. So if this is a bit boring and you would like to give it a bit of that sidechain kind of rhythm, then you can use one of these devices. And yes, you can, of course, make this and save it as like a custom sidechain if you'd like to not do this every time. So now let me play it with the our customized sidechain on. Yeah. Now it is sidechaining quite hard, so maybe we'll let it go a bit. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Simple 2-minute technique of making your own kickstart. How about that? That's all, my friends. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions and if you'd like to chat, please drop your chats in the comments below. And make sure you like and share the video as well with your friends. And if you like more content like this, subscribe to our channel. We'll be bringing more videos to you. And hope to see you guys soon in the next video. Take care.